A drone struck a large skyscraper in Moscow early Monday, shattering glass on its 17th and 18th floors, Russian officials reported. The wreckage of a second drone was found on Komsomolsky Prospect, a thoroughfare in central Moscow. Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said 2 non-residential buildings were struck but there were no casualties. The incident comes after another night of attacks on Ukraine's Odessa region. Drones targeted port infrastructure along the Danube River, injuring 6 people and destroying a grain hangar, said Ole Kuiper, the regional governor. Here's the latest on the war and its ripple effects across the globe. Moscow downed the drones by electronic means, the Russian Defense Ministry said, blaming Ukraine for the attack. Drone strikes are a rarity for the Russian capital, and a similar strike earlier this year on 2 residential buildings there was widely considered a prelude to further escalation in the war. Though Ukraine denied responsibility for the drone attack in May, the event struck a chord among Russians, who for the first time witnessed wartime hostilities trickling into residential parts of the city. The overnight drone attack in Odessa lasted 4 hours, Ukrainian officials said on Telegram, part of a string of attacks in the port region that has been ongoing since Russia pulled out of a UN-backed grain export deal. An earlier bombardment razed several parts of the southern Ukrainian port city, killing at least 1 person and injuring 21, including 4 children. Ukraine attacked an ammunition depot in Crimea with drones overnight, the Russian-backed head of the peninsula said. Sergei Aksyonov said the depot was located in the Zhenkoy area of Crimea, where Russia has a large air base. He said debris from a Ukrainian drone also damaged a home in the Kirovsky district, southeast of Zhenkoy. The Russian Defense Ministry said Ukraine attacked Crimea with 17 drones, but said most were disabled by air and electronic defenses. 3 drones fell on Crimean territory, and there were no casualties, it said. The Washington Post could not independently verify the claims. Russia illegally annexed Crimea in 2014 and uses the peninsula as a base for its forces. Ukraine has so far taken back about half of the land that Russia initially seized in the invasion, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said during an interview with CNN. However, he tempered Kyiv's inroads with warnings of a tough path ahead. These are still relatively early days of the counteroffensive, he said. Ukrainian pilots will begin training with F-16 Fighting Falcon aircraft developed by the U.S. Air Force next month, Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov told CNN, adding that training sessions take place across several European countries. As for supplying the aircraft, Blinken on Sunday cautioned that it could take months and months before F-16s are delivered and operational. The White House in May agreed not to stop allied nations from sending Kyiv the advanced fighter jets. Zelensky said a lack of munitions forced Ukraine to delay a counteroffensive planned for the spring. We had not enough munitions and armaments, and not enough brigades properly trained in these weapons, he said in a CNN interview. Global impact. Unilever said it will allow Russian employees to be conscripted if they are called to fight. We will always comply with all the laws of the countries we operate in, Hejinaudo Eklicito, the company's chief business operations and supply chain officer, said in a letter to the B4 Ukraine coalition this month. He added that Unilever, a British multinational packaged goods company that employs about 3,000 workers in Russia, condemns the war in Ukraine as a brutal, senseless act by the Russian state. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko met in St. Petersburg, Russian state media reported. The Kremlin previously said the leaders would discuss their nation's strategic partnership. The meeting came 2 days after Putin warned that any attack against its neighboring state, a close ally in its war on Ukraine, would be considered an attack against Russia. Putin accused Western partners of the Black Sea grain deal of failing to address global food insecurity. In an article posted by the Kremlin Monday, the Russian leader said high- and middle-income countries benefited from exports shipped under the deal instead of African nations. Data published by the United Nations shows that 44% of exports under the deal went to countries classified as high income by the World Bank, and 37% went to upper-middle-income countries. The remaining 20% went to lower-middle and low-income countries. The UN, which helped broker the grain deal, has argued that it allows more grain to enter the global market, lowering food prices around the world. Analysis from our correspondents. The moral dilemma of sending cluster munitions to Ukraine. For the past week, Ukraine has fired US-provided cluster munitions at Russian targets. Their use comes with a moral dilemma, and at a particularly fraught moment in the course of the war, Ishan Terror writes. The bombs are banned in 123 countries, including the bulk of NATO member countries, but the United States, Russia and Ukraine aren't signatories to a convention prohibiting their use. This month, the Biden administration finally agreed to dispatch them to Ukraine, a move that could give Kyiv an advantage on the battlefield, but not without a cost.